Friends, let us take up for the day amendments brought in the area of taxation, that is exemptions and the deductions, and then I will take up the amendments which are brought in the area of tax deducted at source and then advance tax. These 3 to 4 aspects we will cover for the day. Let us start with the exemptions. First thing that we have to look at is the amendment brought with respect to the charitable institutions. Before we get into the amendment what it is, first we should understand that in charitable trust taxation, first as a student you should be clear with what is a charitable purpose. Of course, there is no much of a change in that definition of charitable purpose, that is relief to the poor, providing education, medical relief, advancement of any object of general public utility, and then your preservation of that nature. Like that, they have given a list of things which comes under the charitable purpose. And with respect to the charitable purpose taxation, what it is, actually who has to do the charity? It is the government which has to do the charity. So now it encouraged the private people to do the charitable activity, thereby you got societies, trusts, non-profit companies which are carrying on this particular charitable activity. Now the law says what? There are some conditions to be met with in order to provide exemption in respect of the income earned by these institutions. What are those conditions? Like, first thing is you have to get yourself registered with the income tax. As a society, I am being registered with the Registrar of Societies. In addition to that particular registration, I need to get myself registered with what? That is income tax, Commissioner of Income Tax. Then second important thing is I have to maintain books of accounts. Third is those books of accounts need to get audited. Basically, a society or a trust is an association of persons. If the income exceeds the basic exemption limit, before claiming this particular exemption under 11 and 12, it need to get its books audited. And then friends, most important thing is you have to make application of the income. 85% of the income need to be applied for the charitable purpose. 15% you can accumulate to be applied in future, and whatever the accumulation that you are making, you have to specifically invest in the specified investments under section 11(5). In a particular year, in case if your application falls below 85%, on account of the reason that you have a very big purpose, like somebody came and gave 5 crore rupees to me to construct a cancer hospital, then naturally overnight or before the due date or before the closure of the accounting year, it is not possible to spend the whole amount and bring the cancer hospital. So naturally I will make an application to the income tax department stating that this is the purpose for which I am keeping the funds marked, so I will apply. Then they will give a permission, which permission cannot exceed more than 5 years. Similarly, sometimes it may so happen that the funds may be received either at the fag end of the financial year, or a particular income might be accrued but not at become due. There what the law says, if that is the case, you can apply such income in the immediately next year, that is either in the year of receipt or in the subsequent year you have to make an application of such income. So these are the few important things with respect to the charitable trust taxation. Now what is the amendment? Let us look into it. Amendment is, now in the name of charitable trust so many crimes are happening and charitable trusts are taken for converting the black money into white money. That's where every year you will see one or the other amendment coming into the charitable trust taxation. Now one of the aspects in that particular definition of charitable purpose is, charitable purpose includes carrying out any objective of general public utility. Then if this becomes your main objective, the law says keeping this as a main objective you cannot carry out the business. You can have the business, but what we were saying is the gross receipts from such a business or such commercial activity should not exceed, what is it, 25 lakhs. This is not an amendment brought by the Finance Act of 2012. This is an amendment brought by the Finance Act of 2011 itself. But then what is happening is, in case keeping the main objective as that is general public utility, if you are carrying out a commercial activity wherein the receipts are more than 25 lakhs and all, they used to cancel that particular registration and the exemption is not going to be allowed once the registration gets cancelled. Now the law says, no, there is no question of you are waiting for cancellation of the registration. Even if the registration is not cancelled, in respect of such income or in respect of that particular year, you are not entitled for the exemption. Because one thing, friends, like today let us suppose I start some charitable institution, and if I go on depending only on donations, it is not possible really also to carry out the charitable activity, because the moment the donations stop, I have to reduce my activity. So there must be some activity which should be continuously be there, which should be some income generating activity for the even the trust and the society. So they have allowed some business to be carried out, but only when your main objective is objective of general public utility, this restriction is there. If your main objective is providing education or medical relief or helping the poor, then you can have commercial activity, and there your receipts can go beyond 25 lakhs also. This restriction that you should not have commercial activity, and even if you have commercial activity, that receipt should not exceed 25 lakhs only applies only with respect to such institutions whose main objective is of that general public utility objective. So this aspect you have to carefully make note. So the amendment here is what? That is, the benefit of exemption can be well taken away even if registration is not cancelled, is the point. So please make a note of this. Charitable institutions. Amendment in section 1023C, amendment in section 1023C comma section 13 and section 143. What is it, friends? 1023C. What is 1023C? 1023C specified funds and certain institutions are covered by the 1023C. I am not looking at the institutions because they are all government owned kind of thing. Whereas educational institutions, hospitals, instead of coming and getting registered themselves under section 12AA, they can also get it done under 1023C. And one more important thing in the 1023C is what? Educational institutions and hospitals, in case if the gross receipts are not exceeding 1 crore, there is no need for asking for a specific permission or registration. Only when that is exceeding or likely to exceed, you are going to make an application for registration and all. So whether it is 1023C or 11 exemption, please do remember, more or less the conditions continue to be the same conditions. With respect to the application of the income or with respect to the accumulation of the income, the conditions continue to be the same condition. So the point here is, even if the registration is not cancelled, still you can't enjoy that particular exemption in case if your receipts from the business activity or commercial activity is exceeding 25 lakhs. Write down. Such organizations does not get the benefit of tax exemption, in the previous year, in which its receipts from commercial activity, exceeds the threshold limit of rupees 25 lakhs, whether or not the registration or approval, or notification issued is cancelled, withdrawn or restricted. So that means, what is it, friends? For withdrawing exemption for a particular year, it will now not be necessary to cancel the registration of that particular trust, as and when the receipts from the commercial activity are exceeding 25 lakhs during any particular previous year, then exemption with respect to that particular previous year can be well withdrawn. So earlier, only when registration is cancelled, whatever the exemption that is there, they used to withdraw. Now please don't wait for cancellation of that particular registration, that is a different issue altogether. The moment the receipts from commercial activity are exceeding 25 lakhs, what you do is you go for the withdrawal of the exemption is a point. Now, one small example here so that you can remember it. An institution having its main object as, again, you have to remember as a student that this kind of commercial activity, that is receipts from commercial activity and restriction on receipts from commercial activity, is only there only to such institutions whose main object is a object of general advancement of a object of a general public utility. What is most important? This should be the main objective, then only this restriction is there. If your main object is providing education or medical relief or helping the poor, then we don't restrict you to have a business receipts more than 25 lakhs. So, an institution having its main object as advancement of the object of general public utility received rupees 30 lakhs in aggregate during 2011 and 12 from an activity in the nature of the trade. Then it applied 85% of its receipts from such activity during the same year for its main object, that is advancement of object of general public utility. What would be the tax consequences of such receipt and application thereof by the institution for the previous year of 11 and 12? And then if the institution receives 23 lakhs in aggregate during the previous year of 2012 and 13 from an activity in the nature of trade, what would be the tax consequence? And then see, the point here is, the moment your receipts from the commercial activity are exceeding 25 lakhs, such an institution will not be allowed to claim the exemption, even if it is going to apply the 85% of its income for charitable purpose. Then friends, the institution will lose the charitable status and consequently the benefit of exemption for the previous year 2011 and 12, irrespective of the fact that approval is not withdrawn or registration is not cancelled, the exemption will be withdrawn is a point. Whereas in case if the receipts from commercial activity are less than 25 lakhs, then there is no question of a withdrawal of the exemption. So, since already you have written this, write a small note. The restriction with respect to, receipts from commercial activity, is only applicable in case if the main objective, of the institution is advancement of object of general public utility, advancement of object of general public utility. So friends, this particular amendment will have an effect for institutions who are enjoying the 1023C exemption or charitable institutions. This particular restriction do have an application. Now I move to the next amendment, which is brought in the area of exemption, is 1010D. What is this 1010D? See, receipts from insurance policies. See, insurance policy on its maturity. How the maturity happens? Either on happening of the event of death or after lapse of the prescribed number of years, the policy gets matured, and whether those proceeds will get taxed or exempted. The answer is 10(10)(d) says that if you are having any receipts from the insurance policy, that is an exempted income. But of late, what is happening? Banks are doing insurance business and insurance companies are doing the banking business. That's where you have got LIC Housing Finance, and you have got Punjab MetLife insurance company. Punjab National Bank and MetLife combinedly got into this particular insurance business. Now what is happening is, normally insurance policy should be what? It should not be an investment oriented policy. It's more of a risk oriented policy, risk coverage oriented policy. But the banks, once they started doing the insurance, they developed the policies. If you see that policy premium amount, it don't appear like an insurance policy, it appears like an investment policy. So in order to discourage exemption for such policies which are more of a investment oriented rather than risk coverage oriented, long back itself we have made the point very clear that if the premium is more than 20% of the sum assured value of the policy, then we say it is more of an investment oriented rather than the risk oriented. So the exemption is not going to be there for such policies. Now what they said, that is no, where is the question of accepting for a premium amount to be 20% of the sum assured? Let us reduce that from 20% to the, what is it, 10%. So as long as the premium paid on that particular policy every year, whatever the premium that you are going to pay, that should not exceed more than 10% of the sum assured value of the policy. Only in such situation, on maturity of the policy, once you get money, that will get exempted under 10(10)(d). Yesterday, finance bill of 2013 is introduced. Now they increased again this from 10 to 15%. But of course, as a student, you have to remember only this one. What is it? It is being reduced from 20% to the 10%, and you should not get into the amendments brought by the Finance Act of 2013, because for your May 2013 and November 2013, only the amendments what we are discussing in that class, that is of the Finance Act of 2012, are only having application. So now the point here, the amendment brought in 10(10)(d) is only the point that in case if the premium amount is exceeding 10% of the sum assured value of that particular policy, then proceeds from such insurance policy will not get a exemption. So in order to claim the exemption, the premium amount should not exceed the 10% of the sum assured value. Now with this understanding, please make note of this. Section 10(10)(d), section 10(10)(d), deduction of life insurance premium. When we say, the restriction is with respect to that, okay, write down. Any sum received under life insurance policy, any sum received under life insurance policy, including the bonus, but excluding the amount received, under Keyman insurance policy, is exempted, provided the premium amount does not provided the premium amount does not exceed 10% of the actual 10% of the actual capital sum assured, actual capital sum assured. Of course, I am not going much in deep into that particular amendment. This much of the knowledge is enough. Now I move to the 1023 FB. What is this 1023 FB? First, in case if you understand, then you can think about that particular amendment. See, venture capitalism now is the order of the day. What is venture capital? First of all, see, we are living in a country called as India, where wealth is with 20% or 15% of the people concentrated. The rest of the people are just like that living. So Venu is having crores of rupees given by her father, his father, and Chakravarti is a technocrat, poor technocrat who don't have any money. He has got money but no knowledge. Chakravarti has got knowledge but no money, right? And Chakravarti is aiming for something which is practically not possible unless huge investment is there, right? And nobody is ready to give Chakravarti that much of the money, because what Chakravarti is saying is something infrastructure project or a risky business. Similarly, nobody is willing to give to Mr. Venu more than 10-12% of the interest. And Chakravarti and Venu met in tahataha.com. Which .com? Tahataha.com. There is a .com called as tahataha.com. See, certain relationships, certain contracts will happen only when both the parties have got eagerness, feel to get into contract. That's what in Telugu we call it as tahataha. Okay. So in tahataha.com we both met and I explained the idea to him. He is ready for investing. I already told to him that first 5 years don't expect. He said no problem, but next 5 years you have to pay me 70% of the profits for my investment and you have to take for all the labor that you have done only 30% of the profits. Like such scenario, you have the venture capital program. Okay, just to make you to get into what is venture capital, I explained it, but it's a very big subject. Probably you will be studying in one or the other part of your curriculum. Friends, try to understand. I am going to explain here 3 things. One is venture capital fund, second is a venture capital company, third is venture capital undertaking. First, try to understand what it is. What is a venture capital fund? What is a mutual fund? Public will contribute their money and they will be given units, and this venture cap, that is mutual fund, will invest in the different places. Like that only there is a fund called as venture capital fund, where public will give the money and the expert there in the venture capital fund will be managing that particular fund and will make the investments. Where they will make an investment? In the venture capital undertaking. Similarly, venture capital company is a company which is going to make investment in the venture capital undertaking. What is venture capital undertaking? it is also a company which will carry out this particular, what is it, infrastructure projects and all that. So who are the investors? Venture capital fund and venture capital company are the investors. Where they are investing? In the venture capital undertaking they are investing. Now whatever the venture capital undertaking is going to pay to the venture capital fund and venture capital company, that and all gets exempted is a point under 1023 FB. Now what is the point here is the nature of the business to be carried on by the venture capital undertaking. Earlier they said that is venture capital undertakings must be engaged only in specified businesses. Now they said no longer that requirement is there, as long as that is your venture capital undertaking is registered with the SEBI and conditions prescribed by the SEBI, in case if VCU venture capital undertaking is satisfying, then the income received by the venture capital fund and venture capital company from the venture capital undertaking gets exempted as a point. So since there is an amendment, there is a probability of asking you to write about 1023 FB for small 2 marks question. So please make note of it. That is section 1023 FB. Section 1023 FB. What is that section 1023 FB? Venture capital company or venture capital fund registered with SEBI and deriving the income from venture capital undertaking is exempted from tax, a tax. Note, what is venture capital undertaking? Write down. Venture capital undertaking mean such domestic company whose shares are not listed in a recognized stock exchange, and which is engaged in any of the 9 specified business, businesses. Amendment made by the Finance Act of 2012 removed the sectoral restriction, and subsequent to the amendment VCU, venture capital undertaking, is a one which is referred to in SEBI brackets venture capital funds brackets venture capital funds regulations 1996. Only thing that you have to remember in this particular amendment is earlier where this venture capital undertaking should carry out the business, that is in which businesses it has to do. There are 9 specified business, that is it is a sectoral specific. Now they have removed that sectoral specific. As long as it is able to satisfy with the SEBI regulations, that is enough for us to call it as a venture capital undertaking. Then whatever the income this venture capital company or the venture capital fund receives from the venture capital undertaking, that gets exempted under section 1023 FB is the point. Then friends, I move to the 1023 BBH. Of course, not much relevant from the examination point of view, but to have a overall coverage, we are taking up this. This new section is inserted with effect from 1/4/2013 to provide for exemption from tax in case of income of Prasara Bharati Broadcasting Corporation of India from the assessment year 2013 and 14. Again, it is with respect to the the applicability is from 1/4/2013, whereas you in your examination the financial year is what 12 and 13 is a point. Then I move to the 1048. What is a 1048? That is crude oil. Crude oil, where it is available? See. So Iran and Iraq war. Iran, Iraq, for that matter, the Saudi Arabia, all these countries are rich because they have got lot of oil in the sea, Arabian Sea. So in case if we are purchasing from them that particular crude oil and all, if you say since there is a business connection with India and that income will be subjected to the taxation and all, probably they may say we don't supply to you. Then the problem comes. So any exemption or deduction the government give with a specific objective. So also your 10 clause 48. So the point here is it has been explained that in the national interest, in whose interest? National interest, a mechanism has been devised to make the payments to certain foreign companies in India in Indian currency for import of the crude oil. The current provisions of Income Tax Act would render such payments taxable in India because payment is being received by these foreign companies in India and in Indian currency. Yesterday also we were discussing this particular point. When you call it as an Indian income, in case either the place of accrual or the place of receipt is in India, then it becomes an Indian income. But for this particular exemption, that income, since it is being received in India by the foreign company, it becomes an Indian income and it will definitely be taxable in India. But if in the national interest, government brought this particular 10 clause 48 and said the income will get exempted. So this would not be justified when such payment is based on national interest, and particularly when no other activity is being carried out in India by these foreign companies except receipt of the payment in Indian currency. They are not carrying out any other activity. Bring the crude oil, make sale of it here and take the money. Then it is therefore proposed to insert a new section 10 clause 48 with a retrospective effect from 2012 and 13 assessment year to provide for exemption in respect of any income of a foreign company received in India in Indian currency on account of sale of a crude oil to any person in India subjected to certain conditions prescribed therein. So this provision is a made effect from assessment year 2012 and 13. So what this section provides? This section provides for exemption in respect of any income of a foreign company received in India in Indian currency on account of sale of crude oil to any person in India is a point. So this is subjected to the conditions of what? The receipt of the money is under an agreement which is entered into by the central government or approved by it. First thing is there must be an agreement with the central government to supply such kind of the crude oil. Second, the foreign company and the arrangement or the agreement has been notified by the central government. Again, central government has to notify that with so and so foreign company we have entered into with this kind of agreement. And the receipt of the money is the only activity carried on in a foreign by the foreign company in India. So if that is the case, then exemption will be given to that foreign company. Please make note of it. Section 10 clause 48. Section 10 clause 48. Income of a foreign company. Income of a foreign company received in India. Received in India, comma, in Indian currency, comma, in Indian currency on account of sale of crude oil, on account of sale of crude oil to any person in India, to any person in India. Conditions. Conditions. Number 1, the receipt of the money is under an agreement. The receipt of the money is under an agreement which is entered into by central government then number 2, government should notify such agreement, government should notify such agreement. Last and most important thing is what? Third is the receipt of the money, the receipt of the money is the only activity, is the only activity carried out by the foreign company, carried out by the foreign company in India, in India. Then friends, I move to take a small issue. Please remember, there are certain things which we will revise. There is an overlapping kind of thing. See, we say when the payment is made to a resident or a non-resident, with respect to certain payments without deducting the tax at source, in case if you are making the payment, then that gets disallowed is a point. And then a payer who without deducting the tax at a source, in case if he makes the payment, he is said to be a SSE deemed to be in default. But what our understanding is, in the earlier session discussion also, as long as the payee who is the recipient of that particular income offers such income and pay the tax on such income and file the return and obtain a certificate from a chartered accountant, then the payer shall not be deemed to be an SSE in a default is a point. So, such kind of provisions, why we are again and again repeating is definitely that is going to be a question in your examination. 40A and then 201 and 201 1A calculation of interest is a definite important thing. Now, with that we have done with our exemptions which are given under section 10. Now, I am moving to the deductions topic. See, deductions is definitely a very important topic, either for the PCC or for the final, for the simple reason in computation of total income you have got definitely the deductions, and all those important deductions we will take it for the discussion.